Hello, I thought I'd make a video about my 1/18 scale RC4 wheel-drive D90. This is something I picked up from eBay, and it came with a few changes from the original ready-to-run version, which I'm going to talk about in this video. So the first thing are these 3D printed parts on the shock absorbers. Now I think these are homemade because after searching on the internet I couldn't find anything like them. So the pieces used on the top bracket consist of this collar which slips over the top of the shock absorber, and this spacer which fits over this lug when the shock absorber is screwed to the shock tower. The bottom bracket consists of two parts, and these are screwed onto the shock piston and held into place by two nuts. And then this straddles over the axle and is held in place by the hex bolt. So these components have two functions. This is a picture of the original metal shocks, and they have internal springs. Now these are the original metal shocks, and they've had the internal spring removed, and the 3D printed parts have been put on to enable the use of an outer spring. The second function of these 3D printed parts is to raise the ride height by 6mm. Now this is something that I personally didn't like the look of. My initial thoughts were to replace them with a new set of original shocks, but these would cost me around £30 with carriage. So I decided to try and revert them back to the original ride height using spare parts. Now I had these shock absorbers, and they're from the FMS Power Wagon, but they've been replaced by metal shocks. So I took the rod ends off the bottom of these and screwed them onto the bottom of my D90 shocks, and this still enabled me to use the outer springs. Luckily, these reverted the shocks back to their original length of 40mm, bringing the D90 back to its original ride height. Now the other thing that's been changed on this is the steering setup. This is RC4 Wheel Drive's official photo of my D90, and the yellow arrow is highlighting the stock steering link at the front of the axle. I've highlighted the position of this on the underside of the chassis with the red line, and that has been removed and replaced by this custom-made steering link, which has been installed on the back of the steering knuckles. Now to make this, they've used 2mm threaded rod along with a couple of 2mm nuts and a couple of metal rod ends, and they've covered the threaded rod with a length of yellow heat shrink. I would just like to point out that when I was taking this apart, I suddenly realised that the rod ends were the ones that had been removed from the metal shocks. The same has been done with the steering link that attaches to the servo horn. Now I'm not a big fan of that yellow heat shrink, and I covered that with some black heat shrink. Another thing I've done, which is a mod that I saw on YouTube, was to remove the suspension links from the outside of the chassis to the inside of the chassis. Now I'll take a moment to point out what comes with the RTR, and it has an RC4 wheel drive micro electric motor, and I can't find anything about this in the specs, so I don't know what turn it is. All I can tell you is it's brushed. Also included is this 2S LiPo, and in the older versions like this, it didn't come with a balance lead. The battery sits on this metal plate and is held in place by this Velcro strap. But because the metal plate is smooth, no matter how hard I tighten the Velcro strap, I couldn't stop the battery from slipping. So I got some of this sticky back foam, which is a couple of mil thick, and I cut some strips and stuck them to the rails of the plate. Now when I tightened the Velcro strap, the battery was held securely in place by the foam. The servo is an RC4 wheel drive metal gear micro servo, and I believe that's 9 kilograms. And this is the RC4 wheel drive 2-in-1 micro ESC and receiver, and it's very basic. It has an on-off switch on the top along with two sockets, one for your battery and one for your motor, and there's a third socket on the side for your servo. The chassis comes with an all-metal front axle and rear axle, and a metal front bumper and rear bumper, and the D90 comes with 1-inch black metal beadlock wheels, along with 1-inch RC4 drive dirt grabber all-terrain tyres, which are a smaller version of the ones that are on my 1/10 scale D90. The chassis also comes with metal drive shafts. This is my new driver. Her name is Puma, and you might recognise her because her twin sister drives my WPL C14. As I had the interior out to fit the driver, I decided to paint a couple of the items in the back. Now I did this by hand with a brush, and it's not the best of jobs, but once the interior is back inside it doesn't look too bad. Now my driver's legs were too long for her to actually sit on the seat properly. Now I could have cut them off below the knee so she would fit, but when I modify things I do try to do them in a way so I can revert them back to how they were, in case I need to use them for another project. Now her legs were easy enough to pop off the ball joints at the top, and then all I had to do was hot glue her onto the seat. And here's a few shots of her inside the D90 when I put the interior back. And some more from outside. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the video now, but I just wanted to show you this photo of my D90 next to my Axial SCX24 deadbolt. RC4 wheel drive market the D90 as a 1/18 scale RC, and as I'm sure most of you know, the deadbolt is a 1/24 scale RC. Personally, I can't see a great difference in size between the two, but I'll leave you to make your own minds up about that. Now, since I've made this video, I have taken out the D90 for a test run, and there are a couple of links in the description box below. One of them is for the video edited in slow-mo, and the other one is for the video in real time. And if you made it to the end of this video, well done, and thank you for watching.